Aoniche Audanse. Welcome to this deep dive and Q&A focused on the second episode of Baarake. So this is something new that I haven't done before. Ne tokoko Coleman noye arama jaloye farafina. My name is Coleman. I'm the creator of Ankata, and in this video, I'm going to walk us through some of the linguistic side of the second episode of Baarake, focused on Sise, the commuter. So if you're new here, think about subscribing or giving this video a thumbs up. And then otherwise, if you are watching this live and you have questions as I go through my presentation, feel free to post them directly into the chat. And if you flag them by starting it with a Q, then I'll be able to easily find them, and I will go through some of them once I get through the initial presentation. So, Ankata. Aiwa. So, Sesan, Neko. The first thing I want to talk about is kind of Jula sounds. So in this episode of Baarake, Sise is from Côte d'Ivoire, and there's some things in his speech that make it slightly different from Bambara. So the first thing is some particular sounds in Jula, or kind of sound changes, if you will. The one that I want to talk about first is the use of ra for la. So that happens, the use of an R sound instead of an L sound in some words. So here's an example, for instance. Aiwa. So that's one. You can say Nka Baarake yoro la in Bambara, at my work. But here, Nka Baarake yoro ra. So if here's another example. So there you kind of hear the same thing. Baarake yoro ra instead of la. And then there's going to be one other one. So I think that kind of shows you that this is a typical feature of Jula speech, and then you can hear it, la becomes ra. This can also happen in some other words, but those are the main examples I picked out. The next thing I want to look at is the use of ya instead of ka in possessive noun phrases. So normally if you're talking about something, for instance, you say nka mi fin, my drink, and the ka is your possessive marker. I've done a YouTube video about that before, which you can find. That possessive marker, also in some Jula varieties, not from Burkina so much, but from Côte d'Ivoire, sometimes sounds a little bit more like ya. So here's some examples. Uya Baarake yoro. So in that case, instead of uka Baarake yoro, meaning their place of work, their workplace, we hear uya Baarake yoro. And then here's another one. So there he says neya dugu. So instead of ne ka dugu, my town or my village, he says neya dugu. So let's listen to it one more time. Neya dugu. Aiwa. And then after this. Uya deon. So this one's a little bit atypical because typically when we think of the word deon, we don't think we need the word ka. So we would just say den, my child. But here we have or the equivalent of ya den, my child, or ka den. But you hear it here as uya deon, their children. So I'm just going to pause this for a second because I got a question here, and this is from Alliance Reporter who says "Et en français." So dans cette vidéo, en fait, je vais tout faire en anglais pour l'instant, mais n'hésitez pas si vous avez des questions, vous pouvez les écrire en français et je vais y répondre après la présentation. Donc il n'y a même pas de problème, faites comme vous voulez. Aiwa, bah c'était. All right, so the next thing I want to present on is the use of ni instead of len. That's the past participle marker, so you might know it, for instance, in a sentence like un sigilendo in Bambara, meaning I am seated. But here in Jula, we typically hear people using ni instead of len. So here's some examples. So let's listen closely. He says un sigini instead of un sigilen. All right, and a few other examples. Here's another one. So afuruni beyan, meaning she married it is, or she is married. So kafuru, to marry somebody. So afuruni, meaning she is wedded. And instead of saying afuruleng. So that's typical in Sisei's speech. And then we have one other example. So ihakli signen be oyorla. So ihakli sigileng in Bambara, but here ihakli sigini. So the next thing I want to look at are actually some examples that are more Jula grammar. So instead of just about some sounds, they're more about the way that Jula grammar can be different from standard Bambara, right? So this isn't any commentary saying that Sisei's way of speech is not correct or it's not standard. I just mean that it's different from what you find in Bamako, for instance. And that's why I think it's worthwhile to look at. First thing I want to look at is the use of be-ye in equative construction. So for instance, I could say ye karamogoye, I am a teacher. But we're going to see that in Jula, particularly in Cote d'Ivoire, not so much in Burkina, they will use be-ye. So let's look at some examples. Donc, asantan beniye. So its 10th year is this, meaning it's been 10 years. So you can hear, instead of asantan ye niye, it says asantan beniye. And then let's look at two more examples. So my father was the head of a business. Allez tomber chef d'entreprise. If this were in Bambara, then we could expect it to be allez tunye chef d'entreprise. All right, and then we have one more, and this is just to say that sometimes there's some exceptions. Ako aye niye de. So it is this, meaning this is it. So in here we see that he doesn't use be-ye. So this is a great example of the way that the line between Bambara and Jula is actually a lot more blurry than we think. So aye niye de, we could have expected it to be abe niye de, but instead he uses what is typically considered standard in Burkinabe Jula or in Mali and Bambara. The next thing I want to point out is the use of ka instead of ye. So it's going to be ka with a low tone. So ye is our past marker. So for instance, if I say neye jimi, I drank water, right? And we're going to see that in Jula, this could become something like nka jimi. So let's look at an example from the interview with Sisei. So there, akaunwele. There, akaunwele in Bambara or in standard Jula could be ayeunwele. He or she called me. And then here you can see it's with ka. Let's look at another two examples. So there we have iyere ka alon, meaning you yourself have known it, or you yourself know, right? So listen carefully. Instead of iyere ya don in Bambara or iyere ya lon, as we might expect, we get ka. Aiwa. The last example I have of this one. So let's get me back on camera. Sorry about that. Nka nyere abiye, meaning I got myself dressed. And here, instead of saying nye nyere abiye, I got myself dressed, using the French loan word, we hear nka nyere abiye. Aiwa. So the next thing that I want to talk about briefly is some of the Jula lexicon, so Jula vocabulary. So this isn't so much sounds that are slightly different, this isn't so much grammar that's different, but rather this is kind of like pants and trousers between English from the US and English from the UK. So one example, for instance, is the use of words like lo or long, and you'll see it also with this word bon. So let's listen to our example. So he said, ka ika bon loing. So first of all, lo typically, if it is in Bambara, would become jo. So people would say, ka ika bon joing, meaning, and then you construct or you build your house. Ki ika bon jo. Ka jo is to erect or to build a house. And bon in Mali and Bambara typically is used to mean more something like a room. But here we see that this is more the Jula meaning where it's something like house. So ka ika bon lo, we could have expected that in Bambara to be ki ka so jo yin. So let's listen to it one more time just so you can see what I mean. Ayo. So let's look at our next one. We can see this is... Alright, so this is one that we actually already saw before, and what I meant to say is that this one is focused on long. So let's, instead of having that be bolded, we're going to actually say it's this one that should be bolded. We should have something like this. Oh, sorry, I'm just getting it set for you. Iereka long. So this technically is a sound thing, but just to point out that iereka long, right? In Bambara, we would expect don. So long is prototypically Jula. It also shows up in Maninka, right? So that's something that is very a marked Jula form, or if you want, a Jula accent, right? But he doesn't use it all the time. So if we look at another example here, we can see Ate mogosi don. So he knows nobody, right? Alete mogosi don. Don being a Bambara form to say to know somebody, ka don. But here we see that it actually is used even though he's a Jula speaker. So another case of Bambara and Jula kind of blending together, right? All right, so the next part that I want to focus is on the suffix che. So typically in Bambara, if you say neye tubabukeye, so I am a white guy, tubabuke, right? When that means that the word che, meaning man, combines with tubabu to then become tubabuke, right? So the che sound becomes a k sound. But we actually in Jula, this isn't the case. So if we look at a few examples, you can hear it. Ntereche, meaning my friend. So we don't say ntereke as we would expect in Bambara, but rather we keep the che sound and say ntereche. And this shows up again in another sentence. Adogoche. So his younger brother. So instead of adogoke, we hear adogoche. All right. Then the next thing I want to look at is the use of the verb kadari, so to beseech or to request. And this shows up in two main expressions, and these are very kind of Jula expressions instead of Bambara. Mbe ala dari la olela. So ka ala dari fenna. So to ask or request God for something. So kadari is a very Jula way of what would in Bambara be ka deli. So ka ala deli, to ask God of something or ask something of God. But in Jula, ka ala dari, right? So it's very typical. It's actually, I think, used more in Jula than in Bambara as an expression. It also shows up in one other expression, that is this one. Mbinasradari. So I'm going to ask for the road. Je vais demander la route. So that's a very typical Francophone Africa expression that you hear a lot, at least in Burkina. Mbinasradari literally means I will ask for the road. And in Bambara, one normally hears this actually said instead, Mbinasranyini. So I will seek the road. So when you say Mbinasradari, everyone understands it in Bambara, but they'll know that you are a good Jula speaker. Aywa. And this shows up one more time. Fo iye sradari fanani. So you need to ask for the road. You need to ask for permission to leave, right? So kasradari. Aywa. The next verb or the next thing I want to look at that is very typically Jula is the word of kashoko. So kashoko, which sometimes if you pronounce very slowly, could be kaseiko, kasegi in Bambara means to come back. And ko, mbesegi ko sini. So I will come back. It's a little bit like in English, but in Jula this becomes like one single verb, kashoko. So let's listen to his use of it. Ako mbeshoko kata peila. I will go back, or I will go back and go to the country, to my homeland, right? So mbeshoko kata peila. And we can hear it one more time here. Right, so we don't hear mbe segi, fasola. We hear mbe shoko, fasola. And one more time. Ambe shoko. So we go back, right? All right, so the last part of kind of Jula vocabulary or Jula lexicon that I want to look at that shows up a lot in Sisei's interview is the word of yomi. So this is kind of particular. We're used to, when we want to say the word like in Bambara, you could say akera iko. It's as if it's like akera iko you would say with iko, or you can say akera inafo. Another way you hear it is sometimes people use the French word come, right? So akera come, it's like, but we actually also in some Manding varieties they have yo. So you can say akera yo, but in Sisei's speech, what's interesting is he actually has kind of a hybrid form that sounds like yomi or yom. So it's actually the yo combined with the French comme is where at least I think it comes from. So let's listen to some examples. Nkera yomi adogochekwa. So the E part is very subtle. It's almost just an orthographic thing that I put in there. But nkera yom adogochekwa, meaning I became like his younger brother, right? Or I am like his younger brother. Aiwa. And let's listen to two more examples. Abe yom nefe. So it's like, for me, abe yom. All right, and one more example. All right, so abe yom, it's like abe iko, abe kom, but in this kind of particular Jula form that I myself didn't use in Burkina at all, you hear it abe yom. All right, so the last kind of thing that I wanted to point out is just two things that kind of stumped me in the episode, and that is going to be both kind of a vocabulary thing. So the first thing is the use of a word coroneu. So I know that he's referring to birds, but I'm not sure if it actually is a special kind of bird or if it's just a variation of kono. So if anybody is watching this video or is watching live and has comments because they say it that way and knows that they know that it refers to a special kind of verb or bird, please let me know. Here's some examples. So coronel le tumbe un la wili. So the birds or the sparrows, I'm not sure what kind of bird it is. Coronel le tumbe un la wili. So the birds would make me rise, would wake me up, right? And here it is one more time. And then you can hear another example of it. Coronel be kule kule. Oh, and you can see I did a little typo. I typed in kulu, but coronel be kule kule. So the birds chirp chirp, right? Or they sing sing. Coronel be kule kule. So do you know this particular form, coronel, instead of kononi or that kind of thing? Please let me know down in the comments below. Otherwise, the very last thing I wanted to explore is kind of the open question of how to represent the W plural sound on French loanwords. So you can hear it. So let's listen to a French word that he uses that also has the U sound at the end of it for the plural. Villaju konidoni. So in villages. All right, so the question that I have is, well, if I want to preserve the French spelling of village so that it's clear that this is a French loanword, how should I mark the plural marker? Or should I abandon it, and should I, instead of writing village à la française, I actually use Bambara or Jula spelling techniques? So do you have an opinion? If you think it would be better one way or the other, let me know in the comments, please. There's two other examples where this happens. Changer ou cosson. So because of changes, so he's referring to the changes of taking the metro or the bus, and you can hear changer ou. And then finally, one last one. Aywa, kadebauke. So the same issue. How should I write this? Do you have an opinion? Do you think that I should keep the French spelling and add W's, or should I do something else? Aywa. So let's listen to it one last time. Aywa, nalasona video ni dira aoye. Hopefully you all liked this video and you got something out of this deep dive. If this is the kind of thing that you'd like to see for some of the other episodes, please let me know. I don't know if you all are the kind of people that like to dive into these details, or if you're like, whoa, this is too much information, Coleman. If you really like this video, think about giving me a thumbs up. You can also become a patron of Ankata so I can keep making free media and resources for speaking and learning Manding. Otherwise, nka foli baoye, kamben, auniche. All right, so for anyone that's still watching in the chat, I'd love to see if anyone has any questions or anything. So feel free to type them into the chat, and I will answer them now. So let's see. We had first of all, these are some of the comments from people that watched the episode. Yeah, so sorry we didn't have a lot of time to really go into the film. I know I jumped right into that presentation, but I thought it would be cool to show it to you all. So I can't read this because it's in Cyrillic script, but someone says, Inibara film nikadinye. So you and your work, this film, I liked it. So iniche ni jarai fana ni sebulike bamarakana fana okadanye kosobe. Donc alakantonyoye. May God keep us together. Aywa. So if there are any questions, feel free to throw them in the comments. We actually do have one that's right here. And let's see what we got. So there's a question from Matt who says, at what point would you call speech like this Creole or patois because there is so much French mixed in? I think that's a good question, Matt, but I think that in this case, I wouldn't call it Creole or patois at all, because having a large mix of, here, I'll actually keep your question up. Having a large mix of code switching doesn't itself make it a Creole or a patois. Creole or patois is something, when someone is saying there's been new grammar forms emerging, and, you know, even the concept of Creole linguistics is kind of itself the study of colonial societies where they thought that there was a population of people who did not speak the language as a first mother tongue at all. I think in this case, Cisse is clearly a mother tongue speaker, just like in episode 1. And so actually it's a massive case of influence from French, or it's a massive case of code switching. So that's actually something that we see with a lot of populations, people that speak Spanish and English in the US, they code switch and whatnot. So I actually don't think that humans necessarily speak one language all the time. They actually move between them in different ways. So you speak different registers of the language. So in some case, you speak a register that's slightly more hybrid because it sounds cool, it sounds street savvy. In other cases, you kind of tone things down because you're talking to your grandma and you don't want to use loan words or whatnot. I think even in Europe, this is something that we can hear when you hear French people and they're like, c'est ma life, c'est la night. So kind of half of what you hear young Parisians saying nowadays comes from English, but we don't accuse them, or we don't say, oh, they speak a patois or a Creole. So that's what I would say about that kind of overall as an issue, but I'm curious what everyone else thinks, so feel free to throw it into the chat. All right, so no other questions in there. I'm going to hang out for a little bit more and I'm going to drink this. I just want to say thanks so much for everyone that watched this, and please give this video a like, or Let me know in the comments if you did like this and you would like to see more of this for other episodes or other content that I've made. It'd really be helpful for me, and thanks everyone that is a subscriber, and voila. All right, so we got a few more questions that are coming in now, so I better eat some more Haribo just so I can read these. So ako, we have one from Alec Medson. Iniche, ebeundeme kosobe ka bamanakan kala. Ika fisabeye. Oh, ayun, ini mo ko korumbonya. Thank you for the respect, Alex. Nim bisagi deme okadinye kosobe. Neko ne nema fisa nim mo siye. Nga mbeunjija warasaki deme. So I'm not better than anybody, but I am trying to help you. Donc, Niko unka bara bideme njusuka di kosobe. Donc, halibi alakanto nyongoye. Aywa. Donc, akodi. Oh, whoa, this just in. This is huge. We got a super chat $10 tip from Serge. Very cool episode. Serge, alaki sara. Alaki wali nyumalo. I definitely was not expecting any tips through the super chat, Serge. Iko ni I mogobaye. Nebi fo ki wali nyumado. Alakan tonyoye fo saya. Aywa. So, we got Evan, who also then is happy. So Evan says, thanks for watching and supporting Serge. That's a big thank you from the co-director and director of photography, Evan Molyneux. So Evan, iniche, Serge kone aye konyumanke aye. Aywa. So we have another question in here from Solmar. So Solmar says, let's see if I can get this on screen so we can see it. Oh. What percentage difference between Jula and Bambara roughly, and what categories of word differ? Thanks, I like the format. So, Solmar nijare kosobe nibe seblike chat kono oye hereye ambulo. So, I think the percentage question is a tricky one to answer. I don't think that there is a hard line that says, oh, this percentage. If you look at the top 100 words in Jula and Bambara, you would see that they're basically the exact same, except for some of the few differences that I pointed out in this deep dive. So little things that are related to some sounds, right? That L's or D's are L's between the two, but nobody that speaks Bambara Jula has trouble understanding those differences. So if you said neya long, right? I have known it, and you say neya don, nobody that's a native speaker has trouble with that. It's a harder thing for people that are learning the language because they're like D and L, that's so different. But really, it's not tricky. I think that you do find that in lingua franca Jula, so Jula in Cote d'Ivoire and Burkina, sometimes it's not someone's first language, right? They don't even ethnically identify as somebody who comes from a family that speaks the language as a first language. They use it primarily to communicate with one another. So in that case, it's a little bit like English, right? You can have someone who grows up, let's imagine a really cosmopolitan life. They're living in Germany, and they learn English there. They watch American TV series and that kind of thing. They can meet other Europeans that have had a similar background, and they would use English too. Are they native speakers? No. Will they say things differently than American or a Brit would? Yes, but they do speak it, and they can do a lot of that. So what you see with Jula is that happens where someone would say, well, it's not my language. I don't really know how to speak it. But they've been speaking it since they were 3 years old. So kind of the concept of native speaker is a little bit tricky when it comes to these situations. Otherwise, if you are really curious, I have a blog post that is on my website that's specifically about what is the difference between Bambara and Jula, and it kind of summarizes some of what we just saw here. So I hope that's helpful, Solmar. And if you need the link, you can try Google what is the difference between Bambara and Jula, or let me know and I can send it to you. Aywa. So what else do we got in here? Oh, we also got another Edwina I Kabako. This is very surprising. So Edwina has also thrown in a $15 super chat. Super chat ni jarayen kosobe. Donc Edwina ini chaini baraji ala kisara ala kantonyogoe. So Edwina, that's huge. Thank you so much. And I know that Evan also then says huge thank you, Edwina. It's a really big surprise that we would get any tips for for doing these episodes and for doing a live stream about it. So, Serge ko, ambe nyoko fe Evan, ika bara kain kosobe. Donc, ako, Evan, he says, we are together, Evan. Ika bara kain kosobe. Your work is very good, right? So, Evan, that's your first Bambara lesson. I hope that's helpful for you. Donc, Serge, halibi alaki sara. Aywa. Donc, c'est ça. Encore dit. Ambana Moonflay. We got Anna who says thank you. So How to Spanish Lessons and Podcast says thank you. Hey Anna, thank you so much for joining. I think it's so cool that you joined for the documentary. I think it's so nice of you. And if anyone's looking to learn Spanish, Anna is an amazing Spanish creator and friend of mine. So think about checking her out. Aywa, donc c'est ça. Amanafle. Dowere be Jacob ko nebe jula ye kabo Abidjan nka foli biye wati kolo. Oh, haketo. Sorry, I just made that really small. I don't know how. Nka foli biye wati kolo ika mandela blasrala aniche. Aywa. So Jacob says, I am a Jula who is from or coming from Abidjan. My greeting, or I greet you in this time. Ika mandela blasrala. So you have put the Mandeng world on the road. So aniche. So Jacob ni jarai kosobe alaki sara alaki wale nyumalo alaka Antonio ye ebe Abidjan kaufanye. Ko auniche auni baraji nala sona ni lonka ja sebarte nebena seka boya mbe fransi yanga mba feka ta ko diwari sera katain nala sona mena seka boroke ni ele ni moko were uye ka auka haglilalo aywa donc halibi alakantonyo we. C'est ça. We have another comment from Oren, also a friend of mine, says, love the personal stories in this series, which is so artistically made, and it's nice to pick up a new word or phrase whilst watching. Hey, Oren, thanks so much for chiming in and letting us know that you appreciate it. And I know that Evan definitely did an amazing job. I'm actually kind of embarrassed because I'm worried that I'll never be able to make another video series on this channel without you all having way too high of expectations, since I would have just filmed it with my phone. But yeah, I think the personal side is one of my favorite things, and I really hope that the new words help. I think you probably mean from the deep dive, but maybe you pick them up from the series too. I'm hoping to do a workbook, so there'll be a workbook that will go with the whole series. So eventually there won't just be these deep dives. Maybe I'll do them for all the episodes, but also there'll be some interactive exercises, just like I did for Na Baarake and Kuma Bakolo. Aywa, donc halibi iniche ebe Angleterre kanfo. Aywa, iniche. Aywa, donc c'est ça. Julia Ko, you're so smart, Coleman. Your work is so great. That's my cousin Julia. She is sick, and you're totally flattering me, Julia. I can't wait to see you when I'm back in the US for my sister's wedding, or your cousin's wedding. So, aniche ala cantonio e Julia. Aywa, donc c'est ça. Donc c'est ça. Oh, Edwina says, you're welcome, Evan. So Edwina is giving a little shout out there. And then Evan, of course, thanks for your help, Coleman. Hey, Evan, I just talked to people, tried to make things happen, but couldn't have done it without you. Aywa, donc c'est ça. And of course, Anna is still out there smiling. Aywa, donc c'est ça. We have one more question. Ibena ni video kisewa. Iowa. So will I save this video? Yeah, my plan is, well, I'm kind of wondering. So I recorded it as a live stream, but I was thinking I would actually that's why I did it really fast and I delivered everything at once, because I thought, hey, this video can kind of live as its own thing, and then I'll just leave it up for people, and I might actually do a trimmed down version. So I'll cut out this Q&A so that people don't get afraid of an hour-long video or whatever it ends up being. But I would really like for it to remain up. The live stream would likely still also be up. So if you all have thoughts about that, I'm really curious how I should use live streams, and potentially if I should do these deep dives for all the videos in the series, or if it would kind of get redundant, or if there's a different way to do it. So if you do have ideas, please post them in the comments or the chat, whatever's easiest. I would love to have your feedback. So iniche Alex, ne mafo bamanakana mafo dulakana nga ne hagla iafamu. So I didn't say it in Bamarajula, but I hope you understood it. Nebena video ni kisi choco ibena seka fle kofe. Aywa, donc nka foribi halibi. Donc c'est ça. Oh, donc c'est ça. Serge getting topical right now. This is kind of a sensitive topic. I'm not sure if we talked about it. So the Oscars were on yesterday. The fact that this was not nominated is a slap in the face. Kanofo sisan da ibato kofe an kanofo sisan na ya foka chaya mogo obena ang basi obena ang bugo. Donc ake dondoni. So let's not talk about that too much. Kind of a crazy event. I didn't even really hear about it until later, but hey, we would love to make it into the Oscars. I would love it if the project was recognized as that. If anyone's got any connections, let us know. Ni elebe Baarake Oscar fe iba fanye choco amana anka video dima ebiseka fendo dama. Aywa, basite. And then, of course, Evan with his kind words saying, Coleman, your phone videos are unmatched. Hey, I'm not done doing them. If everything goes well, I will be back in West Africa doing more phone videos soon. All right, so I think that just about wraps things up. There are no more questions, and we've gone through everything. So thank you again, everybody, for watching this. Thank you for the tips. Thank you for everyone that is a patron in here. So we have a bunch of patrons that are watching, and it really means a lot to me. The reason that Ankata am still doing it now is because of patrons. Otherwise, I would have said, hey, I gotta keep working. I gotta get a real job. Now I'm trying to do this, and I really hope that it helps people. So, unka foli baoye, halibi, alaka amblanyafe, alaka demeke anye, alaka shini kenya di ambela jenema. Aywa. So, one last comment that I'll throw up there. So Evan says, and yes, we're very open to feedback and criticism on the format and presentation. Very much in development. So happy your help to make it grow. Cool, Evan. Thank you, man. Aywa, donc c'est ça. One more comment. Ndemuso togoye aminata. Aywa. Ako mbifo ajara ambebe sigileno amerikila. Aywa. So he says that his daughter's name is Aminata. And that she says to greet me, and that this pleased them all very much, and that they are all now living in or seated in America. So, au kone au kakanka Ameriki kau foanye, ne kone nebe Fransi ya mena kata Ameriki bana jukuni kera sababu ye mena katai nga akadinye nka se kata bo auye. Aywa. Donc c'est ça. And it says, thanks for your work. See you soon. Bye, everyone. So thanks, everyone, for joining. And Edwinako, Amina alaka suhere chaya kambe. Aywa, Amina yarabi alaka dugaumena. Aywa, so thanks, everybody. Nijarani alaka suhere chaya alaka donwere yira anna kambe.